Wendelin, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. It's morning for me and Harry.
Yeah, it's in California here. It's about 5 o'clock, so yeah. Evening. Yeah. And
did you take some time today to just reflect on the gravity of the day?
Yeah, reflecting and tearing up, and just, I don't know, it's such an emotional day here, and right. Yeah.
So much has happened over the last 20 years, and we had a talk last night about this, and about just we're recalling where we were and the emotions that we felt during this tragedy. And it's been 20 years, and we just want to make sure that we don't forget those people who lost their lives. I mean, we always say we'll never forget, but I think when we're not living up to how we said we were going to, which is, this is no longer one country, we're no longer divided, we're one country. It's like, I think those are ideals we really need to start living up to, and that's really how we remember those people. So that being said, we want to start off with a little bit of we call it friendly fire, but we'll call it like a friendly fire / lightning round, specifically with your books. Okay, so this is going to be solely related to your books. Okay, you ready?
All right.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. So if you could meet any of your characters, any one character in real life, who would it be?
So, okay, this is supposed to be lightning round, right? And that's so hard, because I feel like all my characters have a part of my heart in them. But I would say, because I have 18 books in the Sammy Keyes mystery series, that I would totally want to hang out with Sammy Keyes.
Sammy Keyes. Okay. So if you were a 13-year-old or a 14-year-old, which one of your characters would you want to go on a date with? And you weren't married, obviously.
Right. No, but I think everybody probably in that age range would answer Bryce Losky.
Bryce Losky.
Although, as a Sammy Keyes fan, the crush in her world is named Casey Acosta, and I think I would rather go out with Casey.
All right. Actually, I was just making a joke too, because Harry's from Australia, so Bryce is actually from Australia. Bryce Losky. All right, Harry, you got the lightning.
Oh, see, that's terrible. It's like, that's a terrible question. I want you to do a redo, because it's like saying, which one of your babies do you like the best? So it would totally depend on who you were and what you liked, and I'm not answering that question.
Okay, how about this one? Which one is your personal favorite? I'm very
No, you can't ask me that.
Really?
Come on, no, I can't answer that. That's just
I'm gonna go with flipped. Okay, I see. All right, and last one. Can you give us like a general idea of what maybe like your top 3 most popular books are, and kind of like maybe like a rough guesstimate of how many they've sold, or how many you've sold in general?
So I understood the first part. It's like, so flipped, because there was a feature film made out of it, is more widely known around the world. Sammy Keyes, because there are 18 books in it, have sold a lot of copies over the years. And I would say The Running Dream is catching up to Flipped in its, like, people knowing about it. So those would be the top 3. And I missed the second half of your question.
Can you give us like a rough estimate of how many books that they've sold, either individually or collectively?
Oh my gosh, it's like in the millions. I have no idea. I'm not one of those people who studies the spreadsheet of it. I'm more into the heart of writing. Yeah. So and with book club, and with book fair, and with sales around the world and everything, I just,
it's hard to keep up.
Well, and I don't really, I'm not the king in the counting house counting all the money. I would rather just spend my focus on the work's impact on other people, their lives and their emotions, and because that's where I come from as far as writing.
Yeah, you know what is amazing is, so I've done quite a bit of research actually, watching all your past interviews. and I'm about to put we're going to put something up from one of those interviews, but I have been genuinely amazed just the level of love and impact that these books have had on people, and not just kids. I don't really like to just call you like a children's author, because one is young adults as well, but then it's also adults like me who actually really like not only like your work, but just the message behind it, by like empowering younger people and maybe females as well. And so I just think it's just so utterly powerful. And as a father of a daughter, half Korean daughter, it's resonated so strongly with me. And so I just really want to thank you for that, Wendelin.
Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate that you've got, that you've gone and researched it. And I think that what people find when they read my work is that I do let my heart out, which is, it makes you very vulnerable, and but that's what I do, and I think people feel that when they read my work, and that means a lot to me.
If you take a look at TikTok, there's been close to 500 million views off of videos that are related to Flipped, not necessarily by you, but just really. People make their little testimonials, or they do actually like recuts. It's just so cute. They did. I saw. I'm not sure if you saw this one, but they like remade like the trailer, but with like younger kids. It was so adorable. It's like adorable.
The flipped, they're called edits. The flipped edits on TikTok. I mean, I could spend years looking at them. They're just delightful, and then the heart that the kids put into it is like, that's my Bryce, my Julie, and the way that they do it is so clever and just creative. I just love the fan base on TikTok for Flipped.
Yeah, it's amazing. So speaking of which, we want to get started at some of your roots, because from the research that I've done, I think has one of the most amazing stories about persistence. And I think you've released a recent book called Hope in the Mail. And the way that I saw you explaining it about like literally putting hope in the mail, that's just phenomenal. Because I'm almost positive like 99% of people would not have been able to persist through that, because that seemed just some insurmountable odds. So can you just give us a little background about how you got started?
Okay, so Hope in the Mail is my first nonfiction work, and it's a book to give people inspiration toward their creative pursuits. So it's for writers, but it's for anybody, adults included, that feel like they have a creative passion, but they run into roadblocks in their lives, and it's really hard. It's really easy to get discouraged. So the phrase "hope in the mail" comes from my husband and I. We're both young writers wanting to get published and being rejected a lot. So I was writing novels, and I would take them to the post office, because back then it was, you went via snail mail as opposed to email, and I would put a manuscript to an editor agent in New York, and I would leave the post office feeling a sense of hope, like I was creating the possibility that someone somewhere would read my work and want to buy my story, because we were living in it was a really hard time. We had been through, well, I specifically had been through some awful times with my original family, and so there was tragedy. There was a lot to cry over, and we were just going through this really hard time, and I used writing as a way to cope with the things that I was feeling about that. And eventually it evolved into writing books for young people. But it's not how I started. I started needing to really get back at the bad guys in my life, and just it was therapy more than it was literature. But I had this notion that if I could place a book, that I would get $1 million, and it would take care of my family's financial troubles. And so I would write and I would send to editors and agents in New York, and then they would reject me. But every time I would write something new, I would send it out again. And so my husband started saying, when I get depressed, because I would get reject lists, and when I get depressed about it, he'd say, well, did you put hope in the mail today? And it became that phrase that he and I used for each other to keep each other going about our creative pursuits. It's like, did you mail something to someone who could possibly say yes to you? And so hope in the mail became that phrase that got us through, for me, 10 years of being rejected by agents and editors in New York before my first book sold.
10 years?
Yeah. And
wow.
You know, if I had known it was going to be 10 years, when I may not have persisted, but I didn't know it was going to be 10 years. And every day I thought today could be the day, because I had hope in the mail and someone could say yes to me. So our philosophy is, as long as you keep putting hope in the mail, as long as you keep persisting, keep trying, keep like growing in your art and keep pursuing, you know, the dream that you have, as long as you keep putting hope in the mail, today could be the day. And my day took 10 years, but it did come because I didn't give up.
And Wendelin, I had read from your Wikipedia page that you had like a business that had burned down, and that was kind of like your motivation.
So that's on Wikipedia. I don't look at my wiki page, but I know there's a lot of misinformation out there. But no, my parents were immigrants from Holland, and they started their own business. And yes, it was destroyed by an arsonist, and that was the thing that started me on my path to trying to get back at the bad guys, because that was just devastating. Wow. So, and today it's true too. You get rejects, but it's in the email, or you get ignored. So both applied then, and they both apply now. Then what you would get would be like a Xeroxed copy of a ditto from the 60s that said, we're sorry, this is not right for us at this time, but please think of us again with your next project. So it'd be like this form, like very poorly copied thing that would come in the mail. So, and rejection is hard. It is, and 10 years of it, I mean, it does wear you down. But the thing that keeps you going is if you are continuing to grow in your art or your whatever it is that you're doing, you continuing to improve, and then you can say, well, okay, you didn't like that, wait till you read this, because you're gonna think this is the best thing ever written, and you're gonna send me $1 million, and my family's financial troubles will be over with.
And that's something else I'm interested in. How do you get better at that? Because I think it's easy. I know a lot of people who are creative types, and they can just sort of sit and keep doing stuff, but it can be questionable as to whether that stuff leads to any valuable output. So what's the tip for getting better at something while you're sitting there working through those 10 years of application and rejection?
Well, I think just doing it is important. I think a lot of people, especially about writing, people dream about being a writer, but they don't actually put the words on the page. So you have to actually do it. It's like anything. If you want to be a good basketball player, you need to go out and practice your, shooting hoops and dribbling and doing the things the basketball players do. If you want to be a sculptor, you need to sculpt. And the more you do it, the better you get at it. Even if you don't see yourself getting better, you are getting better. So, and also then educating yourself. And reading other work, if you're a writer, reading other work, analyzing it critically to see how, why does this make me cry when I read it? Why did this make me laugh when I read it? Why do I think this paragraph is so beautifully written? Like, analyze it. Go to school in the creative area that you want to excel, and that applies to to any pursuit, I think, is just you have to do it.
Yeah. So I saw another interview with you, Wendelin, and it showed the actual house. And Harry, if you could put that up, I sent you an email. But this is where you're living at the time. And does that like motivate you even further to say, like, I want to get out of here? Or did that serve as a kind of motivation for you? Because I've seen your house now and it's quite significantly better.
So 400 square foot flat roof rundown rental in a bad part of town. And it was, yes, every year for 10 years, every Christmas for 10 years, I am not spending another Christmas in this house. And then you spend Christmas in the house and your husband says, did you put hope in the mail today? So yeah, there it is. That was the place where my writing career started. And it was actually, that's a good looking version of it.
Wow.
And you know, we built a fence, we planted plants, we patched the roof, the windows didn't open. It was a temporary place that we were living while we got back on our feet. And temporary turned into 10 years. And but see, I think that the best stories might come from a place of adversity, because the person who reads your work can feel your heart in it. I know I keep saying that, but it's like Sammy Keyes and the 18 books in that series began in that little house. And I looked out the blinds at, you know, the homeless people on my porch, and the violence. I mean, there were gunshots, it was a bad part of town. And all of that worked its way into this series about a disenfranchised girl who lives illegally with her grandmother in a seniors only building. So it all became kind of woven in. And I say, like, if I had lived in a gated community, I don't know whether there would be
Right. Actually,
I was just talking about that just the other day where I've got a lot of friends who are artists. I was into theatre for a while and have written a book as well, though it didn't go nearly as well as yours have. And I often talk with people about artists and whether the government needs to support artists and whether it needs to be a viable living. And I do think there is something to be said that adversity sort of builds some of the best art. It gives some of the best initial starting state for somebody to become really fantastic at what they do, because they can speak to something like exactly as you're describing of homeless people sitting on the porch, a connection to difficulty and adversing, you know, triumph over adversity that can be so much more powerful when it comes from a place of authenticity, that if it doesn't come from that, it can, I don't know, I think it can lack something or end up being totally...
Yeah. And you know what, Wendelin, I recently sent you a podcast that we did with a man who has cerebral palsy, who actually died at birth, and how to spend like 8 months.
You have the most diverse, eclectic guests on your show. It's really fascinating, and I did watch that, and he's a rapper. He has this just attitude, which is just so cool.
Yeah, you know, it's so funny. You have to see the episode that Darrington and I did right before that. Literally, he mentioned in there he had to go pick up someone's kid. So Darrington and I were sitting around for an hour. So we're like, oh, we might as well do something here. But we talked about the issues like in a very philosophical way. And he comes in just like a guy off the street and just spits all this street knowledge at us. And it was amazing because he was talking about like everything that we were talking about, but just in the way that maybe most your average person might talk. But anyway, what I was asking him was that if he thought that having like a disability could actually serve as, you know, something like a catalyst to motivate and to overcome. It seems like, honestly, in the long run, it's like an advantage, because what he told me, the way he explained it, is he used a pejorative to refer to me. He called me a normie. And he said, whenever you're like a normie, which means you don't have an outright physical disability, then you can kind of become complacent, you know? And so the way that he owned his disability, I got to say, I've seen a lot of people talk about their disabilities, but he was like, this is not a disability. It's not a disability to me. You may think it's a disability, but in my opinion, you're the one with the disability. So I was like, wow. So anyway,
can I?
Sure.
So I think that it's his choice of attitude, right? That this is how he chooses to look at his situation. Right. And I think for a lot of us, it comes down to that choice of attitude, how we are going to take the lemons in our lives and make them into lemonade. It really, there is a lot of choice to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, so we want to get into some of your actual work. I was wondering if you could give us like a really quick synopsis of Sammy Keyes.
No.
Because
but before we go to Sammy Keyes, can I just, because this would segue into The Running Dream.
Okay.
So The Running Dream is a story about a high school track star who loses her leg in this bus accident on the way back from a track meet. And so she thinks her life is over. So we're talking about, and the reason that I wrote this book was because I was a high school teacher for many years, and it seemed that no matter what you would try to do as a teacher to have your students be inclusive of people who were different, it's just a hard sell. It's trying to get them to include them in their lunch circle or whatever it is that you're trying to give them a home inside this place called school. It was always just difficult. And so I thought that, so I ran the New York Marathon, and I saw these just incredible people with physical challenges that I couldn't even dream about running 26.2 miles with the challenges that they had. I mean, it was hard enough having two.
Right.
Yeah. So it got me thinking, and then being a teacher, and I came up with this character named Jessica who loses her leg, and it sounds tragic and awful, but my reason for it was that when Jessica thinks her life is over, it's how you reframe your life, right? And you go through that period of mourning. You're mourning the loss of your leg, and that your life is so forever changed. And she goes back to school, and it's just horrible. And she notices that people won't look her in the eye anymore. They don't know how to deal with the fact that this horrible thing has happened to her. And she gets sat in the back of the class, her math class, by another student who she has never looked in the eye, a student who's in a motorized wheelchair and who has cerebral palsy. And so it's the friendship between those two. It's like this girl goes from being a track star and very popular to now she's sitting beside this girl with cerebral palsy that she's never said hello to, and she has nothing in common with. Wow. The girl with cerebral palsy is really smart. She's a math whiz, and she winds up helping Jessica catch up in math, and they form a friendship. So this becomes the story about the two of them, and about Jessica helping her new friend achieve a dream that she had for many years. And but my reason for writing it was because I wanted to get into the heart of my former students, and students now across the country read this as an all-school read, but I want to get to touch their heart, because Jessica could be any of us. She could be any person with their whole life looks like it's coming up roses, and suddenly something happens, and realizing that could also be you, and how would you want people to treat you, and how would you reframe your life so that it was a bigger, you had a bigger, broader purpose than just being the fastest at the 400. So I wanted to bring that up because of your previous guest, and just kind of that association with the whole idea behind The Running Dream, the book, is that what you see as the finish line. Like she sees this as the finish line of her life. It's over. But actually, when you look at a track, the finish line in many races doubles as your starting line.
Yeah.
So,
oh wow,
I like it.
so
I like that. Yeah.
How you frame, it's how you reframe your existence. And so that's what that book's about.
This has got me interested. I've fascinated by how much this might affect you, because I think that nowadays, well, it's a difficult topic to write about disability. And I think for lots of different reasons, many of the books you would write would delve into interesting areas where people would worry about what kind of message that's sending to children. Have you had any instances of that, of people sort of saying, oh, this book's terrible because I found this sort of this passage that for some reason doesn't speak to my morals, and I think Wendelin's a bad person trying to get you cancelled?
Wow. To tell you the truth, no.
Oh, wow.
People, readers of my work, I guess, maybe, no, they send me a lot of love, and they send me a lot of support. And I know that there is a small faction of the population and of the readers out there who like to bite and cut. But they're compared to the positive people out there who love and share books that have impacted them and affected them. I think, the biters and the cutters have nothing on them.
That's some of what was making me think it, because if I just pull it up here, when I go to look at any of these, not only do your books have just extraordinarily high ratings, but they're also, people just effusive, just glowing. Oh, actually, it's not showing that. There we go. Just people glowing about the sort of the story it told me. And I thought, it's got to have brought some people out of the woodwork. So then are you thinking, is that at all in your mind, dealing with topics really sensitively, if that's never happened to you?
I absolutely have respect for and sensitivity toward yes, and I will always have my facts checked, and my like I have a neighbor who's a grown woman. She's born with cerebral palsy, and but she has recently gotten what do you call it? It's not a lie. She's a lawyer now.
Oh,
She's
wow.
passed the bar. She's a lawyer, and she's an advocate for people like herself who to represent in court. She's also a pilot.
Wow.
I'm just like, this woman is just amazing. And so when I was writing The Running Dream, I asked her to read it before I sent it to my editor, and she had notes for me. Okay. And I listened to her notes.
Wow.
Oh, would you be comfortable sharing what some of those are? Because that's fascinating to me.
She's one of the things I remember, and it's been a little while now. But one of the things that I remember was that she, the dialogue. She said that the character with cerebral palsy, her name is Rosa. Rosa is a math whiz. She's super smart, but she speaks in simplistic sentences, and to reflect her intelligence, you need to give her more difficult sentences. And I thought that's spot on. So, yeah.
That's so speaking of which, talk about doing some research or something about having a backstory. Bryce's father, and inevitably Flipped is going to come up.
We're going to come back to Flipped, aren't we?
Yeah.
Let me get it up.
Speaking of which, you got a little special thing here, a little special surprise at the end for that, but we'll save that to the end. But so Bryce's father, and this was actually supposed to come up in the first one. I'm glad that both of my co-hosts totally wind up fizzing out, because it actually saves us for this question here. But to what extent would you write a background story or have it into your mind about a character like Bryce's father? Because it becomes very obvious that one of the reasons why he's so angry is because he has this dream he didn't get to pursue, and it's turned him into a bitter person. So whenever you're writing background stories about someone to influence their decisions and their words, to what extent do you do that? Like, would you say with a character like that, he was really trying for this amount of years to, you know, to make this record, and he never could. He was trying to save up money, or what extent will you go to actually like fill in, even someone like Sam Keyes or Julie Baker? Do you actually write like a background story about them, and to really make them authentic?
I know that a lot of authors do extensive like character study before they start. My preference is to get to know the characters better as I write them, like to let them show themselves to me. And so it's an evolution through the pages of me getting to know them like you get to know anybody. I just but the drawback for that is that the revision process is more extensive than it is for someone who has already done a character study and they've defined everyone before they go in.
That's what I was thinking. You would have to change bits and then go back and go, hang on, no, that's not how that got that way. Right.
So, but the benefit is that it feels like a natural evolution into getting to know somebody, as opposed to like I have a preconceived notion of who this person is. And when I'm writing about them, they're going to uphold this preconceived notion of who I said they are. So there's no room for like them to show you who they are, which sounds crazy, I know.
Oh, no, I get it.
But it's so I like to have a general idea, and then I like to have it evolve. And sometimes it evolves in a direction I wasn't expecting it to go. Like the character says to me, no, this is who I am. And I'm like, oh,
wow. That's almost like being a god, of like you're having a character. I mean, like
sometimes I feel like I'm the character's pawn and they're just, they're moving me around. That's what I feel like. I'm like, wait, don't go over there. I don't want you to go over there. Oh, I'm going here.
So what I've heard is called character rebellion. Okay, that's a term I've used. We actually we interviewed a creative, like a fiction fantasy author, and he was talking about the extent he would go to like try to understand the character. So for example, he would do stuff like brew his own beer to try to, he like, because they're doing something like that, or he would actually go out and like do work with like steel work, so you could kind of like get an idea of banging up their hands.
Absolutely, I do all that stuff. This is
really
like in Wildbird. She had to start a fire with using just friction, and I've done a lot of camping, but I had never started a fire with just friction, and so you did. I do all that stuff.
Wow.
If you want to know what the
really
inside,
tough thing to start a fire with that way.
Well, there's a whole story in Hope in the Mail about it, and like the epiphany I got from my time doing that research, and it was actually research is such a fun thing. It makes you feel like you're always still learning, and there's an infinite number of things to learn. So being a writer and doing your research is actually it could be a distraction from getting pages written, because it's just so fascinating.
You know, it's interesting, Wendelin. So initially when I had contacted you, you were a bit reluctant to come on because some of the topics we talk about some controversial topics, but we keep it very surface level, very respectful, which is we're trying to set an example for other people to look at the way we can discuss things and agree to disagree on points and still be respectful along the way. But we were very cautious to not mention anything personal or anything controversial and when we had a discussion about Flipped. But that being said, you had gotten it caught me really off guard. I mean, you could see me like literally in the podcast. I like it just catches me off guard because you became emotional when discussing some of the characters and some of their behavior. And so in what sense do these like characters become like real to you, where you feel like they're yes, in a sense they're just imaginary, but in the case of like Sammy Keyes, that was so powerful. Whenever you're talking about Sammy Keyes helps a homeless kid or something, and then you talked about some homeless person wanted something from, I think, her laundry or something, wanted help you with her laundry, and the character actually wound up influencing you in your own real life. I thought that was fascinating. So can you give me a little bit of like, how do you actually view these characters? Because they seem pretty dang real to you. Let's say that.
Yeah, they are. And it's for me, it's a very emotional thing to be in a story with any of these characters, especially Sammy Keyes, because I have 18 books. And so I have spent that many years, you know, in her life. And it was the last Sammy Keyes book came out the year my son turned 18. So he's an adult, he's going to college. And I'm like, it's like my girl, my imaginary girl. I mean, she's my daughter, right? I don't have a daughter, I have 2 sons. And I'm like, my girl. And it was just like, I bawled my eyes out when I finished, oh my gosh, when I finished the series, because she is so real to me. And my characters, when I spend time with them, it's just like I'm immersed. I think about them all the time. They're in my head all the time. And yes, so that story about the homeless woman and how she knocked on my door and she wanted to use my dryer to dry her clothes. And I had my 2 little kids, and my husband wasn't home, and I'm like, because we were living in that little house, you know, in a bad part of town. And it would just have been easier to say, no, I'm sorry. But in my head, it's like, well, Sammy Keyes would help her. What's the matter with you?
Yeah.
So it was like, and it was that moment I realized that even though I'm creating this character, this character is making me a better person.
Right.
Which is just a trippy thing for your head to absorb.
Yeah, that's a huge thing. So there's do you read your books back?
Well, after the revision process, when I've read through them probably 30 times, I never read my own work, or I haven't. Okay. I haven't, because I can't take off the editor hat. It's like, oh, I should have done that. Oh, I should have done, you know. So I really don't go. I don't read my book at night, my own book at night. I don't do that. I read other people's books.
I'm fascinated by language, and that's why it's very interesting talking to an author. And I just heard you then go from saying I never do that to then sort of self-edit in real time to say I haven't. What was going through? Why the?
I have no idea. I have no idea what I just said. So.
Well, you said I never read them, and then you said, well, I haven't.
Yeah, well,
because it just, what struck me is it's slightly similar to when you were talking about the character in the Running Dream speaking more complex sentences. I really like that ability to self-edit, to speak more accurately, or to be mindful of how your message is going to land.
And I want to be truthful too, because I didn't want to say this, but I have recently opened up Flipped, and I'm like, who was the person that wrote this book? Because she's really funny.
Oh, lovely.
Wow.
That would be a lovely recognition to have of yourself. Hey, I wrote this, and this is very funny.
Wendelin, so a couple things I want to talk about here. First of all, did you ever see the movie, The Never Ending Story?
You know, I haven't. I'm familiar with it, but I haven't.
Really? Okay. So, like, the protagonist in that story is... So I myself am Mexican, I'm Latino, and he's not Mexican.
Sorry, go on.
Oh no, it's like a sci-fi. No, that's like a fantasy. He plays like, but anyway, he's just dark. His hair is dark, and he's a bit darker skinned, but I think he's still Caucasian. It's like seeing like a Ralph Macchio and like Karate Kid, just someone a little bit darker. It was so relatable and so empowering to me to the nth degree. And so I think it's just so powerful whenever you're writing about characters and people can relate to them. And I remember feeling so immersed into that story, the Never Ending Story. Okay. And I think for you, when you're writing, and even me, I can come in and see the story that's taking place. I feel like so immersed in there and so relating to some of the people, especially like Julie, being Julie Baker being on the lower end of the socioeconomic scale, and just feeling like I just feel like something like a part of her, like I'm right beside the story with her. It's so amazing actually that I have actually become disinvested into this story, because it has been so powerful and so enriching to me. And it's the kind of things that I talk about as far as empathy and trying to understand people. Like I couldn't have designed a better book that I would say, this is what I'm trying to go for. Like, this is what I'm trying to do with this podcast. It's just to try to understand the other person. Doesn't mean that we're going to agree, but to understand them. So, yeah.
So, I think that is like, if I had to summarize it all comes back to that. Sammy Keyes has a nemesis, and she's just a mean girl in middle school. And Sammy and she has a neighbor who's trying to prove that Sammy lives illegally with her grandmother. Like, why would a person do that if you're that poor off? You know, why would someone try to make your life more miserable, get you out on the street? So Sammy asked her grandmother, you know, why is Mrs. Graybill such a bitter old woman? And her grandmother says, well, it just happens to people sometime. And Sammy's like, well, if it just happens to people, then it could just like happen to me. And she doesn't accept that answer. She wants to figure out why it is that this woman has this bitterness in her. And it takes 4 books, but she does figure it out. And the same thing, Sammy Keyes has this nemesis, and across 17 books, she's just this mean girl. So why is she so mean? Why is she? And so in the 17th book, Sammy and the mean girl have to work together, and Sammy figures out that it all comes out why it is that she hates Sammy so much. So, but I think that is that like with Flipped, it's like looking at the other person, looking at the other side. And I think that if we could all just take a step back and try to figure out why people are feeling the way they are about things, that we would, as a society, move forward in our healing. But just thinking this person's bad. Well, why are they the way they are? Why are you the way that you are? Exactly. We have our reasons, and people should. And so the idea behind a lot of my books is look beneath the surface of what you're seeing, and try to feel what the other person's feeling, because I think that goes toward healing.
Yeah, and let me give it a little bit of a background on this, because I've seen a lot of interviews like with people who play villains in movies, and they want to play the best damn villain that they can. Okay, someone like Joker. I'm not sure if you saw, I think Suicide Squad. Yeah, Suicide Squad. Jared Leto went through this extreme lengths to actually play the Joker character. In fact, he did what's called method acting, where you totally immerse yourself in the character, and you will not break character for anything. They'll literally live months in this character's role. What's his name? Tom Hanks actually went to like a boot camp for like 2 or 3 weeks preparing for Saving Private Ryan to get into that mindset. So what I've heard them say is that in the eyes of a villain, they're the hero for their story. Okay, so when you understand that they don't see themselves as a villain for whatever circumstances, they genuinely, obviously it's a warped way of thinking, but they genuinely thinking that they're doing the right thing in the moment. So if they want to play those characters, they genuinely have to see themselves as the hero of the story. So I think that's
the most hurtful people are often the most hurt. It usually comes from some sort of hurt or feeling deficient. Go on.
Yeah, I don't know. Thank you very much for that. And I'll let you get back to that real quick, Harry. But recently, there has been a huge push in Hollywood about showing background stories of villains. So, for example, 101
the complex villain,
101 Dalmatians.
Is that what
character,
it's called?
Cruella de Vil. Okay, I didn't know that. But Cruella de Vil, and then also like Snow White, whatever, the Wizard of Oz, they all had these backstories. We're like, oh, wow, I totally see why this person would be behaving like that if all these things, like, I totally get it. I totally understand it. So yeah, totally, it adds richness to the characters. But I'm sorry, Harry, I just wanted to finish that thought. Do you have anything else?
No, I think
Harry?
that's so. What would you say then is the secret for people listening to this? What would be the secret for you, Wendelin, for how do you get inside that? Because I think we've all got villains in our own lives. How do you get inside a real person's head if you don't have the benefit of writing, excuse me, writing their character?
So are you asking how do I get into the head of the villain, or are you asking me how do I understand my fellow man?
The second. So with your understanding of how you write that villain, what skills could somebody learn from your books about how they could get into the mind of the villain in their life?
I think that the number one thing is to listen, and to not listen combatively, like to find a way to have a conversation that isn't combative. And then you try to say, well, how might this person see my behaviors? Like it's hard to look at yourself and see the flaws in what you're doing because you feel justified in the way that you behave. And so, but if you teach yourself, take a step back, how might somebody else see the way that I responded or the way that I acted? And then you start to learn to see that, well, maybe I could have phrased that differently, or maybe I shouldn't have had that attitude, because, or maybe I was joking, but I'm not familiar enough with that person for them to know that I'm joking. So both like trying to see why it is that they're feeling the way they are, and acting the way they are. I find that the people in my life who are the most trying, I try to backtrack. Okay, well, there's a reason that they are the way they are, and when I can find the reason that they are the way they are, then I switch my annoyance about them to a feeling of sympathy. Like I feel sorry for you that. I wouldn't say that, but it makes them like that makes the Thanksgiving feast a lot more tolerable when you understand that the person who's acting the way they are is acting that way because either they feel intimidated, or they feel ignored, or they feel there's a reason that they're feeling that way and behaving that way. And so it makes it a lot more tolerable if you can reframe it to saying, oh, well, this is why they're doing that. As opposed to, oh, that's so annoying, man.
So there's two other books I want to get to. One is going to be Shredderman, and it's actually interesting you use that as your email. Curious why you do that, but Shredder Girl. But what's the motivation behind there? Because I remember you telling me a bit about your bullying. If you wouldn't mind maybe giving a little bit of a background about that. Was it like speaking in an accent, or having parents who were just foreigners who don't really fit in, being like, I guess this is a really old expression, but fresh off the boat, or just crossed the border. That is a Mexican, that's what they would use. Was there any of an element of that? And also, I do want to say something very interesting, is that my cousin was like he used to tell us all of these stories growing up at nighttime. He would just speak for hours and hours, just improvising stories. But he actually did something totally similar, at least in his mind. He wrote a similar Shredder character where he had like this alternate persona. He called him Eric Murdoch. And this guy was like a detective or whatever, and he was like catching all the bad guys, which is like totally what you're talking about. So whenever you were talking about that, I was like, oh my God, I went back in time 30 years ago to my cousin who was a victim of bullying. He's like maybe actually, even if I think about it, maybe on the spectrum, like a very high functioning autistic. I mean, we didn't really have those words growing up, really. It was just kind of like maybe just a little bit socially
This is
awkward.
a long question.
Yeah, they're always long.
I love getting in this and talking about why I relate to this, but so the Shredderman, what was the background? Can you give a little bit of background and context on that, and what you thought, because that also got turned into a movie as well? Right?
Yeah, it did. Nickelodeon made a movie out of Shredderman, and so your multifaceted question. I'll take little planes
Okay.
of it and try to answer. So yes, when I was a child, I was, well, yeah, my parents were immigrants, and so they were very frugal and trying, you know, they had their own business and trying to, there's a lot of commitment to that, both financial and time wise. And so they didn't buy into the whole, like I grew up in a suburb of Los Angeles and buy into the whole, you know, style of Los Angeles. And so I wore a lot of hand-me-downs from the neighbor girl. And so I would, including her underwear, which were too large for me because I was like just a string bean. And so I'd take 3 steps and have to hike up my underwear, take 3 steps, have to hike up my underwear. And so that was the kind of thing that people really, other kids notice and they make fun of. And so, yeah, I was harassed a lot for superficial reasons. And also, you know, I was an overachiever because my parents, you know, we're in this new country and it's a blessing to be here, and we need to work hard. So hard work was part of the formula. And so that included getting good grades in school. And so it was just, so I was one of those, you know, people with their hand up all the time because I had the answer. And like so, Julie. Yeah, looking back at myself, I can see that I was odd and I was annoying. But that was no reason to follow me into the bathroom and, you know, look at me as I'm trying to relieve myself over the divider, you know, as I'm trying to relieve myself, and just, you know, jab me with a sewing pin from home ec class. It was just, God. And so that's my childhood, in school. I loved being in the neighborhood with the neighborhood kids. We ran kind of wild and we played a lot of games in the street. And so being at home and being with the kids in the neighborhood was fun, but school was hard because of the dress and just the being made fun of. So then when one of my children was a unique individual, he would rather at 4.5, he was counting by 9.5s and like in his car seat, and we're driving to daycare and he's like 9.5, 19, 28.5. What's next, Mom? I was like, I have no idea what you're doing. I teach math, but I have no idea what you're doing. So I'm counting by 9.5s, Mom. So he obviously had behaviors that people would make fun of. And so, and I would just feel sad to see him like by himself on the playground. And I just like it. They just could know my boy. They would know he's just this awesome kid. But you know, kids, they can be cruel. And so Shredderman came from, okay, I'm going to take my smart, nerdy son and I'm going to fashion a superhero out of that for all the smart, nerdy kids who feel like they've been picked on. Of course, nerds, and we say that, and they proudly proclaim themselves such now. It is not a 4-letter word. It is a, you know, they rule the world now. So I just think that is 4 awesome. Letters. That is just and awesome. ERD. That is 4. No, but you're totally right. It is the Elon Musk. It is the Mark Zuckerbergs. It is the Mark Cubans are doing that. So you don't understand that context though whenever you're a kid. And for as many bad things that happen to you, I have to say I was on the other end of the bullying a lot of times. Both sides. 1 at home, receiving it at home, and then 2 dishing it at school. So you just got to understand at that age, you have no idea about the life. You know, when I look back at myself 20 or 30 years ago and think of the way that I acted out, not knowing how to deal with the stuff that was going on internally, I can look at bullies now with compassion and understand that if you are really a truly content and happy and whole inside of yourself, you could never, like the last thing in the world you want to do is hurt another person, because you would know that you ultimately hurt yourself. You hurt yourself by your character. That is exactly the point the Shredderman series. It's the Shredderman series starts with, you know, Nolan, who is Shredderman, asking, well, it's kind of like Sammy Keyes asking why he's, you know, the neighbor. He says that Bubba Bixby was born big and mean, full of teeth and ready to bite. Like, this bully was born a bully. And then he says, my mom says one thing and my dad says another. My mom says people aren't born bullies, they grow into being bullies. And so in this 4-book series, this Bubba Bixby is just this big just presence. He is just awful. But by the end of the 4th book, he becomes, and I'll just spoiler alert, he becomes Nolan's sidekick. He doesn't want to be a bully. He wants to be Shredderman's sidekick. He wants to do, I can totally get into truth and justice, man. That's what he says, you know? And so and Nolan sees that his father shoves him into the car. Nolan sees that his father is kind of the one who is giving these behaviors permission. This is permission to do this because that's being done to him. So yes, it's like, even with the bullies, there is a reason that they're behaving the way they are, and they just seem mean to us. But there's deeper stuff there that probably, as you in your own experience found out, there are reasons that people behave the way they do, or their perfect life may be in shambles behind those doors, and you don't know.
Right.
I think it's a really important message. I do. Yeah, because it gets to that point you were making before about if you can be mindful of that, it helps to be aware of it. But if you can be mindful even that might be the case, it gives you the opportunity to do what you were talking about before, Wendelin, which is sort of, rather than look with frustration or anger, to instead experience sympathy for somebody. Go like the sort of, I was introduced to this idea long ago that people are doing the best they can at any moment.
Right.
And so if you look at some people, you go, you know, I used to think about it almost pejoratively. That's the best you can do. But then, yeah, it would switch into sympathy to go, what's been happening for you in your life, or just today, that this, you know, when you see somebody shouting at a shop clerk on some viral Twitter video, to go, oh, you've had a tough day or something's going on for you because this is the best you can do at this moment, and it is insulting somebody in a shop.
Imagine if someone said that in reply, instead of like being combative, like going back the other direction, getting into a Twitter war. You know, imagine if someone said, oh, I'm so sorry, you must have had a horrible day because I know you're doing the best you can do, and if this is it, you must have had a really bad day.
Yeah.
Wow.
I like that.
I think the last book I would like you to tell me about, or actually I think there's 2 more. The Gecko, was it the Gecko, and then
The Gecko and Sticky is a spin-off from Shredderman.
It's a spin-off. And then there was, I guess, Wild Bird. You didn't really talk much about that. Would you mind giving us a little bit of context of the Gecko one first?
Okay, so the Gecko and Sticky. So the Shredderman books, there were 4 of them, and I paced them in a way where it came out, you know, about Bubba and that he wanted to be Nolan's sidekick and why he was the mean boy that he was. And I loved the way it ended. And then Nickelodeon made a movie. So again, it's like flipped. It's like people would want a sequel or to continue the story when you have something that's successful. But I really liked the way the 4th book ended the Shredderman series. And so instead I proposed writing the spin-off to it, which is the Gecko and Sticky, which was Nolan's favorite television show. So it's a funny television show that comes to life in the 4-book series of the Gecko and Sticky. So it's designed to give. So I live in California. There's a huge Hispanic population here. I've done school visits to the Central Valley where funding didn't even allow for a PA system. So the principal was like on a ladder in the middle of the quad.
Oh my God.
Giving the announcements. And so I wanted to have a super. So Dave Sanchez is the superhero, and he's like, okay, so you have Spider-Man, right? This is the Gecko. The Gecko can walk on walls. And there are things that there are superpowers that he has with the assistance of his sidekick, who is a gecko. So kids get this. It's like the Gecko is a superhero, and Sticky is a kleptomaniacal talking gecko lizard. So okay, so it's a sort of fantasy, fun superhero book for younger kids, and the idea was to give people who don't feel like they have the things that they would want in life, to show them that they have the love of family.
Wow.
And that they are a superhero.
Wow.
Just from doing the things that they do. So
any chance you've seen the movie McFarland USA?
Yes. Yes, I did, with Kevin Costner.
Yeah. So there is a little bit of a generational gap between my father and I, because he grew up like a farm worker. And so he would tell us stories about just being in the field with his mom, and like having shoes that like he literally had to put it like cardboard in to there, just to keep out the water, you know. And so I had a really hard time to understand my father, some of the context and kind of you know, what he grew up in, because as bad as we had it, I mean, I can imagine he had it 10 times worse. Same thing with my mother. And so yeah, seeing that, and the McFarland USA, this Caucasian coach winds up going and coaching a bunch of farmers, you know, farm worker children, and they wind up winning multiple state titles. And I think that's the key thing. Like a bully can be rehabilitated, a prisoner can be rehabilitated. So one thing I love about the Netherlands, actually, and Norway, that they actually look to rehabilitate people in their prison system. And my dad's a chaplain in the prison system in California, and there's not a whole lot of, I mean, there is some, but just that's not the emphasis, you know. Whereas some of the other places, as I said, like Norway, Sweden, that's actually a big part of their you know, rehabilitation. So I think, yeah, just when you understand the situations people are in, and they might be in a low income situation, in a situation where there's not a lot of resources, as what you're talking about, the yelling out, but you can take anyone and you put them in a better environment, equip them with more resources, and give them the proper education. You could see stuff like Stand and Deliver, if you ever seen that movie.
Yeah.
Where this guy went in
calculus.
Yeah, and he taught them calculus. So it's like, it's a matter of just like I strongly believe in the tabula rasa concept, that we come in, like everyone comes in just like a blank piece of paper, and it's what you put into people, they're going to wind up reflecting that. So speaking of which,
the interesting thing to me about this is that my husband and I, well, actually my friends and I, we have discussions about this a lot. It's just that you can be in a position in life which is really great. You got everything going for you, and yet you complain about things. And it just feels like, okay, like my parents were immigrants, and they worked super hard, and you know, to build a life here. And I saw that, and I appreciated that. And I can tell my children about that. I can tell my children about the hours I worked at their business, and just the things I endured being part of like this whole, you know, coming to a different country. But they won't feel it the way that I do, or the way my parents did. And so it's like, if you get far enough removed and you wind up in a place which is super comfortable, it's almost like you can't really appreciate where you are, because you didn't struggle to get there. And so I think part of the joy that I feel in my life has come through the struggle. And so I look back on just the bad stuff, and I'm like, yeah, but that's what made you the person you are, and that's why you are where you are. So I look back with gratitude, not that I would want that stuff for myself, but I think that because it's, again, you take the lemons and you do your best to make lemonade. And if you can sit and take a sip and it sips really good, then it's like you appreciate that so much more than if someone had just handed you a glass of lemonade.
Mm.
Yeah, very much so.
I say make some lemon meringue pie. I love lemon meringue pie.
Okay.
Yeah. And then yeah, so just the last book I think to talk about would be The Wild Bird. If you could just give us a little bit of context on that. And
okay, so Wild Bird is a story about a young teen. She's 14. She's taken a wrong turn in life, and her parents have tried everything to bring her back, but she's running with the wrong crowd, and she is getting into some dangerous stuff. And so in a last ditch effort to try to save her, they send her, they have her abducted in the middle of the night, and she's taken to a wilderness therapy camp in the Utah desert. So she goes, it's against her will. And there's controversy about these camps. I'm aware of that.
Right.
But like anything else, you need to vet where you send your kid. So she gets sent to the Utah desert to learn to survive in the wilderness with other troubled teens, but also to get to the heart of why it is that she is the way she has become. And the story is really about trying to figure out, it asks the question, who do you want to be? Like, do you want to be somebody that other people just pull around like you're a pull toy and you're just going with them wherever they lead? Or do you want to be somebody who has their own convictions and believes in things and wants to do, what is it you want to do with your life and how do you get there? So the idea of Wild Bird is about, it's challenging teens or people that read it to define the qualities they want within themselves. Who do you want to be? And that is done with the setting of a desert therapy camp where she's against nature. Like, nature isn't going to listen to your whining. Nature isn't going to listen to your complaining. Nature is going to rain on you, and if you don't put your tent up, you are going to get wet.
Wow.
So it's about finding the strength inside yourself to stand up for the things that you want for yourself.
I like it. I like that. I think that's, it's very powerful, because I think there is, and this is what you were alluding to when you first started speaking, I think there is a temptation now, somewhat understandably, to talk a lot about what holds us back, or and I don't think they're presented as excuses, this is why I'm failing to thrive. This is why I'm not failing to thrive is a thing with kids, isn't it, a medical term, but this is the way the world's got it stacked against me. But being able to recognize that, I think on the one hand is important for society at large, but what you're talking about is for the individual, it needs to be, how do you set for yourself a purpose and struggle towards that?
Because I think those teen years, those formative years are so important, because in school, they're like, well, what's your career path, or where are you going to go? Are you going to go to college? What vocation do you want to, it's like, what do you want to do? And it's never, who do you want to be? What kind of person you want to grow up and become? Yeah. And I think that is so much more important, because everything else is going to come from that. Like your self-worth, feeling self-worth is going to have you, wind up with someone who respects you, because you respect yourself enough to demand that someone treats you right. Yeah. So everything comes from that.
Yeah. That's amazing.
I think that's a really important message, because otherwise we get stuck between the as adults, there's constantly this argument about it when it comes to political discussions between stop everything, let's help, let's make sure nobody feels left out or left behind, which is important, versus pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And I think that the answer needs to be somewhere in the middle. That's collectively, let's be mindful of that people are going through different experiences, that the bullies are sometimes the people who are hurting, but also, how do you set for yourself a purpose and struggle against adversity and push forward and do it?
And I think that having like empowering that a teen, a child with those thoughts will bring them into adulthood in a proactive way. And so it's like my goal as a writer is to give my reader this sense that they can do stuff. They can do anything. You know, Jessica can come back and run on a prosthetic limb. I mean, it's like the world is going to hurl stuff at you. Society is going to hurl stuff at you, and you need to have your feet like in a stance of power, and you need to be able to believe in yourself enough to know that you can go up against that and succeed.
Yeah.
I actually got to spend. I gave away some trips to the 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Olympics through my company of Wendelin, and I did get to go down there and spend some time with the Medicine Paralympians, and it was so amazing to see what these people were doing. Some of them with, as you said, like prosthetic limbs, and so one of these guys, he would ski with, he had his prosthetic leg, but he would ski with one ski. So yeah, seriously. And then there's other people who were like paraplegics. I don't understand how they could do this, but they like sit down on one ski. It's like one ski balanced like with a chair. It's like unbelievable.
Yeah.
And then I got to see these other two Olympians from the UK, and one of them was blind. Okay, so what they do is they go down this, and we're talking about like extremely high ski slope, and like I would not go down this thing being fully able to see, being fully body able. It's that steep, it's that scary, and the person in front of them tells them where to go, like go to the left, go to the right. And yeah, this lady was fully blind, and they're able to go down there, and it was quite amazing seeing the triumph of the human spirit to overcome these difficulties. And I just thank you so much, really so much, for writing these books, because I just think it's just so empowering to younger people. And I want to bring this to a close right now, but I do want to ask you a last question pertaining to Flipped, because
of course you do.
Yeah, it's probably always going to get back to Flipped, because there is a lot of people who are positively like obsessed about seeing a part 2. So can you talk a little bit about maybe what you felt you had done with the characters? Because most of your other stories seems like they have multiple sequels, and I understand in one sense that it's just, obviously there's a possibility just to make a lot more money, but what is it, do you feel like a responsibility to the characters, or you felt like just comfortable where you left it? Can you just speak a little bit to that?
I will. Okay. I feel a responsibility to the hope that is exhibited at the end of Flipped. I feel like hope is the most important thing that you can instill in someone, and that is much more important to me to leave with on a note of hope than it is to line out, and they lived happily ever after. Okay, so I have a responsibility to hope, and so I am going to restrain from telling you what I think happened to Bryce and Julie. Well, because too bad. I'd say you were trying to get that out of me. No.
Well,
no.
I presented my ideas on that. Like, I've met one person. I briefly dated a girl whose parents like met in the 6th grade and dated from the 6th grade. And so that's the only person I've ever met in my whole life who was, who knew someone who was dating someone that they had met way when they're children.
Well,
So
I have a couple friends from elementary school who are stopping by my house on Tuesday, and they have known each other. They're married. They've been married this entire time. So it can and does happen.
okay, touche.
So
But the point is when I in our first talk, I said that's not really the point. The point
It's
is what
not.
they've learned. The point is what they've learned about themselves. And if
exactly.
you would write that same story, let's just say 10 years, you just take it 10 years or 5 years in the future, their thoughts about themselves and reality and other people, their family, are going to continue to evolve. You know, the way that I looked at my family, my father, like I didn't speak to my father for years. And as a father now, understanding what he went through, and like my father is my best friend in the world, but it's taken a lot of traveling around the world, experiencing different things to really appreciate the kind of life that my family tried to give me growing up. So I have so much, the respect I have for my father is to the 10th degree now. And so, yeah, it just, you know, we just continue to learn things and evolve. And my thing is, I know how much my perspective has changed from 5 years ago when I wasn't a father. So I just think maybe in 10 years or 15 years or 20 years, when I'm a grandfather or something like that, how much my life, my perspective might totally change about the way that I think right now. So I try to use that in saying, this is how I believe right now. It doesn't mean I'm always going to believe this way. So I might as well just try to learn from other people who might have some different opinions along the way and not say, oh, I'm right, you're totally wrong. And that's just not what I try to do. And it's not how I want to engage with this, podcast. But that being said, we have created a fan page for you. So we're going to do a little bit of exploration of that right now, because very fittingly, Rob Reiner also directed Misery. So if you know anything about Misery, the author gets abducted and forced to make a sequel. So maybe it's not the best thing to have your personal information out on Facebook, because you don't want people doing that. So we've removed it to another degree. So Harry, if you can go ahead and pull it up right now, and we do have another little special treat. So yeah, right, quite ironic. Hey, by the way, Anthony Edwards was Goose. Seriously?
Well,
really?
what? Yes.
He's Goose in The Father played Goose in Top Gun.
Yes, that's where he started.
That's amazing. Okay, we have it up there. Harry?
Mm-hmm.
There we go. So this is an actual fan page.
You made a fan page?
Well, do you have a lot of fans, Wendelin? I mean, I've seen some people who are like borderline like.
Oh, did you make
like,
it? I didn't know you'd made this, Isaiah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I kind of put all your stuff on there. So we got.
I guess you did.
I literally was up to like 4 or 5 last night. I can't.
Wow.
So it's a work in progress, but people can actually come on here and talk about your stuff.
Oh my goodness.
It's a little bit better of because you can actually have like a forum chat and stuff. So
no one's going to come abduct me and make me write the flip sequel.
It's good.
It was slightly a threat, wasn't it?
Yeah, this is kind of. Oh, there I go. You can see me on there right now. But I don't think I've ever seen people get so obsessed. And like as a 40-year-old man, I'm still this obsessed with this story because it's so powerful. But that, speaking of which, we'll make a link available here. But Harry, I also sent you a link to YouTube videos.
3, 2, 1.
All right.
Film directed by Rob Reiner. This coming-of-age saga plays out in various flashbacks between protagonists Bryce Losky and Julie Baker, as they navigate a variety of circumstances and mishaps while developing a deeper friendship. From the beginning scene we are introduced to both characters, as female
He made
lead
an ad
Julie
for the
takes an
book.
immediate interest in Bryce, who is less than enthusiastic. The majority of the film revolves around subplots that involve both characters exploring different sides of themselves and each other, while also learning to see things from the other's perspective. Among the main storylines involves Bryce witnessing a friend snake eat a raw egg, and having an immediate emotional reaction. He later has nightmares about being eaten by a snake, which gives him a natural aversion to eggs. Shortly after, Julie brings over some fresh eggs from her hens, which were the result of a science project. Bryce, unable to face his fear with the eggs, and wanting to avoid Julie altogether, trashes the eggs, though he lies to his family about returning them. This unfortunately goes on for a prolonged period.
Is this going to give
as
the whole
Bryce must now
synopsis? I'm
continue
feeling like
to
we're going to
throw
give away
the eggs
spoilers.
on a weekly basis to protect himself from
Yeah,
having to
it's
admit his
actually only
lies
half
to
of
his
it.
family and Julie.
We
Julie
better not
finally
show
catches
them.
Bryce, and although she is rightfully angry, understanding Bryce's fear of eggs as well as his attempt to save her embarrassment might have eased her
Spoiler
harsh
alert,
initial
yeah.
judgment of him.
Skip forward.
Okay, so where do you want me to skip to?
No. Just let it go. Let it go. It's only half of it, so it doesn't give the whole story. Just let it go.
Okay.
Yeah,
In a
spoil it. If you
related
want to know
subplot, Bryce's
general plot.
grandfather
It's a
assists
general
Julie
plot.
in fixing her yard, as Bryce uses the excuse of fearing salmonella poisoning from her eggs, due to her unkempt yard. This directly shows that there are ripple effects of lies, that may carry on further past an initial deception one might use. Additionally, it demonstrates that positive outcomes can come out of negative situations, such as Bryce's grandfather befriending and helping Julie, as well as serving as a catalyst to get him to think of her in a different light. In perhaps one of the most empathetic parts of the story, it is revealed that Julie's uncle has special needs resulting from birth complications. This has major implications for the family, as they are unable to own a house due to the additional costs of having to pay for care for her uncle. Even when confronted with the fact that Bryce suffered from similar complications, his father becomes even more entrenched and hard-headed in his thinking. While he could have drawn a direct connection to his own child and that of the baker's relative, he chooses to be even more stubborn in his unwillingness to understand what it is like to walk in their shoes. It is later shown that he harbors regret about not being able to pursue his own musical career, while the baker's sons are chasing their dreams of stardom. Adding context to his character helps the reader to understand why he is projecting his own past failures, disappointed with himself, and perhaps had he been born in a different time, might have had access to technology that was unavailable to him as a teen, thus showing a clear generational gap.
So that is the first part of that. Yeah, we'll have to give it definitely spoiler alert when I edit this, but
Yeah, I feel
Thank you.
Go on, sorry, Wendelin.
I love how much you love this story and how you've
it's
been able
pathetic. It's pathetic.
No,
It
it's
is-
not.
I feel like an absolute pathetic loser. I'm
Be-
obsessed with this thing.
Well, so what you've done is study it, and you've pulled out the nuance. Like you know, some kids will read it and they're like, "Oh, Bryce and Julie, oh, it's so cute, I love them," but it's really there's stuff beneath that surface that I really want them to get out of it. And obviously, you have studied it and you have pulled those I don't want to say lessons, but those nuggets out of that.
I'm glad that you're proud because I am absolutely mortified by myself because I've become totally obsessed with this because I'm joking, but at the end of the day, I genuinely, I've told you, if you look at our logo, you can see the flipped concept there. And I think if we just take this chance to just look at the other person's perspective, it just, I told you the first one we did, like if I had like a motto or a slogan or like a mascot, it would be this book for what I'm trying to do. Because whenever you talked about how you wrapped it in this story, I feel honestly like at the end of the day, you like punked like you punked the,
Yeah.
you trolled. I genuinely feel like you trolled me at the end because I'm like, wow, I didn't realize that you were actually doing that to me, Wendelin, until you explained it to me. But yeah, it's really something I believe in. And
Well, I don't think that a message book is one that goes over with anybody, not adults, not with kids, especially not with kids. And so if there's something that you'd like them to reflect on or consider for their lives, I think that wrapping it in a story that they can relate to is the way that the way that you share your heart, because their heart will be open that way. Whereas if you just tell them what to do or you tell them your point of view, it's not going to sink in. They'll tolerate you, but it's not going to sink in.
Yeah.
And so just for society, I mean, I wish that for society, we could take and look at our neighbor, you know, the way that Bryce and Julie have learned to look at each other and see in, you know, beneath the surface, that's the phrase in the book, but to see past, you know, the curtains, you know, to see each other, to see each other's situation. And I think that if we as a society could start to do that more, that there'd be a lot of healing going on.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's a lovely
And
message.
one last really quick question.
This has been 4 last questions.
You don't know how to do a quick question.
This is a very
go.
this is legitimately quick. Can you explain the line where Bryce's grandfather talks about some people are born with gloss, and then he says some people are born iridescent? Can you explain that one? I promise that's the last line. I promise.
Okay, so some people are flat, some are I shouldn't satin, and some are gloss. And once in a while you find someone who is iridescent, and when you do, nothing will ever compare. So that was a line that I wrote as I was writing the story. It wasn't like, oh, I have this great idea for it was that it just started to come out. And because that was one of those things, like if I overplot or if I over, you know, structure, then those like organic moments don't happen as often. So that was just an organic thing that kind of floated out of me, and it has become one of those sort of iconic quotes from Flipped. And because I think that iridescence, it's just like you see someone with a glow of it's like Julie has, see, not a short answer. Julie has strength inside herself. She has convictions of her beliefs. She is somebody who is strong on the inside, and that comes through, and she has a wonder for the world that other people around her don't. They don't care about, you know, what you can see from the top of that tree. They're like, this girl is crazy. But she is unique. And I think that the iridescence is like, it's like that uniqueness, that like power from within. I don't know if that answered your question, but that was
absolutely.
Lovely answer.
No, thank you very much. Actually, this isn't a question.
Wait, one more question.
No, this is not a question. I just want to say this because this is supposed to come out on the first one. It just Adam whiffed this one, but the whole idea that the grandparents, like when you're growing up, you don't really understand how much they actually know, or your parents, how much they actually know, and you're a kid, you think that you know it all. And that's a lesson. I wish I would have learned that one 30 years ago and actually listened to the things that my parents were telling me. So seeing that play out in the story, and seeing the grandfather try to give the son the wisdom I just thought was brilliant. So that being said, Harry, you got any last thoughts?
It's been a lovely chat. Thank you very much for sharing your insights, Wendelin. I think there's a lot to take away. I usually ask people for a so what, but the main one I want to take away is the what you were saying about hope in the mail. Just keep doing it, keep perfecting your craft, because that is such an important thing for people. I think artists definitely, but anybody really, as you were saying. So yeah, thank you very much. It's been a really fascinating conversation.
Thank you so much. It was very nice to meet you and to see you again. I say,
yeah.
All right.
Any last thoughts?
I like what you guys are doing. I think that is very valuable, and I hope that it does continue to go out there and spread respect and empathy for others.
Yeah. And so so the first Flip, because I'm so obsessed with that, we were giving away 10 copies of that book.
We're wrapping it up now.
I know, but we're going to give away 3 copies of some other books. So can you choose 3 that you would of these 3?
I think we said Runaway, Wild Bird, and The Running Dream.
Okay,
Runaway,
all right.
But you could, we didn't talk about Runaway, so you could just throw a Flipped in there instead.
Oh God, now that's, oh my God. And you know this whole thing, because my well, we are wrapping up right now. I'm wrapping up in 2 minutes, but my mom, we did adopt like over 10 kids into our home. So that one. I mean, you have so many books. How can you cover them all in one session? You know, so yeah. That being said, we really want to thank you. I really want to thank you for your works. I think it's extremely powerful, extremely empowering as well. And so, if you want to win a copy to one of those books, just hashtag the actual name of the book, and we'll be picking some winners for that. So it's Wild Bird and Runaway and The Running Dream. Those are extremely, extremely powerful books. I think anyone reading those would take away something very strong that will help you. It will really help in your life. And I do believe the same thing about Flipped, which is why we've given away 10 copies. And so you can actually still win one of those copies by hashtagging Flipped, and we'll post the link to that video because we still have 8 more copies of that to give away. We've actually given away 2. So look us up at www.rhtpodcast.com or look us up on Facebook. You can check out Wendelin's links. We're going to put them all in the comment section below.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you back again. Goodbye.
Cheers. Thank you very much.